Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Once upon a time, there were 5 sisters: Jane, Mary, Lydia, Elizabeth, and Kitty Bennet. Problem was that their dad, Mr. Bennet, didn't have a lot of money. And it was a good thing the mother, Mrs. Bennet, was trying to marry her daughters off to wealthy men as soon as possible. Luckily for the best friend of Mr. Darcy, Mr. Bingley, was very rich and sweet. The moment Mrs. Bingley knew Mr. Bingley was living in town in Netherfield, she was determined to marry all of her daughters to rich, wealthy men. Luckily, Mr. Bingley and Jane hit it off immediately. In spite of Mr. Darcy's wealth, Lizzie and him hated each other from the beginning. Later on, Jan catches a cold in Netherfield, and despite of their home was open, then Lizzie showed up for her concern of her sister's health. Unfortunately, Mr. Darcy and Lizzie were stuck in the same room. Mr. Darcy was even wondering if he started having feelings for Lizzie. Turns out that he wasn't the only one liking one of the Bennet sisters. Mr. Collins was asking for Lizzie's hand, and for a soldier, Mr. Wickham as well. Mr. Bingley threw a ball in Netherfield. What happened was Mr. Bingley had left Jane, and Lizzie left Mr. Collins, but even then, Mr. Darcy couldn't get Lizzie out of his head. Mr. Darcy proposed to Lizzie, but she had rejected him. She had many reasons why. She had taken Bingley away from Jane, and had acted like a jerk, very mean to Mr. Wickham, but that's because he wanted to marry his sister Georgina. It was a good reason. He was trying to reload and marry his little kid sister for her money. Darcy didn't want to leave without explaining everything to Lizzie, so he wrote to her the most amazing letter ever. Later on, Mr. Darcy had went home and found Lizzie and her relatives. Mr. Darcy even got Lizzie to meet her kid sister Georgina. Later on, Lydia had gotten engaged with Mr. Wickham and ran away, actually. Mr. Darcy had Mr. Bingley return to Netherfield and marry Jane. Well, Lizzie found out what Mr. Darcy has done for his sisters and fell in love with him. At the end, Mrs. Bennet successfully married 3 of the Bennet sisters. The end.